In an ever-evolving digital landscape, for your business to thrive, you must adapt or die. Welcome to Marketing in the Age of AI, the podcast helping you harness the power of AI and marketing tools to revitalize and grow your business. And now here's your host, marketing expert and author of Authentic Marketing in the Age of AI, Emanuel Rose.
Welcome to this episode of Marketing in the Age of AI. And as sometimes happens, we got some latency issues. So I hope this all comes out good and clean. My guest today is Chris McNulty, who had strategic markets at Synergy for almost 10 years. He was Senior Director of Product Marketing for Microsoft 365, SharePoint Premium, OneDrive, SharePoint, and Stream at Microsoft. Chris's experience as CTO includes companies such as Dell, Quest Software. He was first recognized as a SharePoint MVP in 2013, a frequent speaker at events around the globe. Chris is the author of SharePoint 2013 Consultant's Handbook, among other works, and holds several patents. Chris holds an MBA from Boston College in Investment Management and has over 20 years experience with John Hancock, State Street, GMO, and Santander. He hosts the Polaris podcast at polarissynergy.com and co-hosts the Intrazone podcast at AKAMS, the Intrazone. Chris, thanks for taking time to join me today.
Oh, it's great to be here, Emanuel. Thanks. Thanks for running through the entirety of my bio. On my own podcast, I just had a guest who's an expert in business strategy last week. His bio's as long as mine, but I think it was a little bit better earned because he's a decorated combat vet, author of 4 bestsellers on business strategy, former U.S. Assistant Secretary of State, 4-time CEO, and a tenured PhD professor at Duke and George Mason. I can't compete with that.
Well, we're not, luckily this isn't a competition, but, could at least include the part about being the prettiest baby at the county fair or something like that too.
Sure.
No, I appreciate your time and thanks for joining me. What I like about you, Chris, is that you're combining the specificity of a CTO with the implementation strategies of a marketer. So I think that structure we can all embrace a little more deeply in the Wild West of AI right now.
Right. Yeah, Wild West is a good way to put it. There is such a broad range of, I'd say, culture and sophistication and how people are approaching both how do you market about AI and how do you use AI for marketing? Because AI is such a Wild West. There are some great applications and some really dangerous applications. There are some people you can trust and some guidance that you really should have second thoughts about. So I like the way that you framed that.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. One of the things that I learned is that we always have to assess the speaker, right? And so we need to understand, does the person who I'm listening to have a background, have experience, have use cases, have philosophies of care that are going to take me in the direction I want to go versus just trying to listen to quick tips from some guy who just watched some YouTube videos, right? And that critical thinking part is a challenge in our culture now as much as ever in terms of who is the speaker. And so that's why I wanted to read your whole bio because you told me to read it and not cold read it. And so I spent some time practicing it for you. But I think that that clarity is an important thing for us to remember as professionals.
Well, thanks for that.
You bet. So I love your background, and I'm interested to hear some of the nuts and bolts about what you're seeing in successful deployments of AI and what are appropriate uses.
Yeah. So, we can talk about it, in the most general terms. AI is not magic dust.
Yeah.
right? You don't go by, people shouldn't be thinking of responding to a mandate to use AI to transform the organization. How many pounds do I need? 10 pounds, 20 pounds, sprinkle it all over. Just turning on AI and hoping for the best is not going to give you the results that you need. So, I've seen in our practice, there are organizations who take a disciplined approach, by which I mean they start with a small bit of experimentation to really reimagine the art of the possible, but then they kind of jump forward to the end, saying, fine, we understand some of these capabilities. Now, what are the 5 most likely business cases that for things that we need to redo in our business? AI, and can AI help them? When you start with that conclusion and work backwards from there, it really predicts how do you who do you need to introduce? How do you train them? How are you measuring that success? As opposed to just turning it on and hoping that people naturally discover the use cases that are going to benefit the organization the most. So that's one of the things. Start from the end and work backwards. We've done that for some of our clients. We've also been asked to rescue clients who have taken the opposite approach. I'd say that the second there's a lot of things that we see, but I'd say the other thing that's very much top of mind for any clients is, security, privacy, governance, risk, compliance, everything in that zone. AI is tremendously good at being able to find and ferret out information. And so that means 2 things. First, you should have standards for how your information is going to be protected. For most business use of AI is hungry for more and more data. The more that you can feed it into the LLM, the better your results are going to be. And the more you're giving it your own intellectual property and keeping it in a trusted place, the better your results are going to be, because that history of your documents and creativity and decisions and transactions and all of those things, it's what makes you you. And so you want that to be reflected, and you don't want AI to reflect the accidentally exposed spreadsheet with everyone's social security numbers and so on and so forth. So that part, that's sort of the down and in security. The up and out security, I heard someone say that they were working on some business plans and they had some ideas for things they hadn't patented yet. And so they fed it to ChatGPT to see what ChatGPT would think about it. And I said, when you do that, it's an open invitation for Sam Altman to take your information and use it to make a better LLM. And it was told, well, he wouldn't do that. Well, look, I know that Sam Altman is a respectable steward of AI, but when you put information out in the public internet, you are exposing it. And sometimes that's fine, right? There's some information that's low risk or no risk, but you should be careful about how you use sort of these unguarded tools to protect the security of your information. So those 2 areas, having a map for how information, what the results should be from AI, and how information is going to be protected throughout that journey, are the 2 things that tend to be top of mind with the clients that we speak
Yeah,
to.
that makes a lot of sense. Um, I like to approach it and say, hey, let's make the executives productive first, right? And build kind of a core of users. So that's
Yeah, that's I've published on this, and I'm actually
okay,
going to
good. I'm
disagree with you
glad.
on that. Because one of the things that, like in those early adoption programs, and this is a pattern that happens a lot with the way Microsoft, for instance, with my history, I know this. Microsoft in the earliest days of Copilot, they would allow you to get 300 licenses. You had to have 300 license minimum to start. And so the natural tendency is, oh, it's the shiny new object. Let's give it to our executives. If you are planning an AI deployment and you want to understand how is it transforming the way people are interacting and communicating and producing, AI is an assistant. And so giving over AI and agents to people who probably already have admins, you're not really changing the way that they work that much. Instead of, asking, can you come to this meeting and take notes for me? You can turn something on to take notes for you. Great. that isn't as much of a predictor, and you're not going to see as much impact as bringing AI to people who are individual contributors. You're actually going to see a bigger shift in how they work, how they communicate, how they produce, if you take the right care there. So I understand why a lot of times starting with the execs seems natural. They're the ones who are paying for it
Right.
in many cases. But you sort of need to balance that with how are you going to drive the right learning to be able to land the maximum benefits for the organization.
Yeah, I can see that, and I think maybe it depends on the size of the organization also.
Right.
For SMBs or solopreneurs or small organizations, maybe it's a different deployment strategy than say 1,000-person agency.
Yeah, but the pattern still. I mean, I'll point at ourselves. Synerger we're closing in on 20 people.
Mhm.
We deploy full AI licenses to our employees. For our contractors, we'll either rotate licensing for them, or they'll get access to one of the managed tools that isn't as expensive and isn't as full powered. So you do have to think through who's going to benefit from it, and we also internally, as well as we recommend that our clients do this, who's using it and who's not. And if if you see that there's a person or a team or an area that's not getting good usage or good benefits, either you need to work with that group to help improve what they're doing, or pick someone else and pick there might be better low-hanging fruit to work on with the organization.
Yeah, that's interesting. Also, as the usage patterns. What does it look like in your workday? What I know you're a Microsoft guy originally, so is it mostly the Microsoft products that you're digging into, or what are you using for your own productivity?
Yeah, for the company, I mean, we're a Microsoft shop. That's not to say we don't have some other tool sets that we make use of. I mentioned before, we have HubSpot fairly well penetrated in the organization. We make a lot of usage of Anthropic, as well as Google's Notebook LM, and the variety of, especially in a go-to-market capacity, some of the especially the visual generation tools. If you're looking at, say, an Open Art or a Midjourney, we're seeing much better results from those than we are from the Google and Microsoft tools. But it changes.
Mhm.
Like, that's the thing. Not only are the capabilities changing, the models change
Right.
all the time. And so, if there's a little bit of a horse race, and if you love to use ChatGPT for image generation because it's better, it's not impossible that next month Midjourney is going to get better, or one of the new people who, new entries that are coming into the market. So the nice thing about most of this AI is it's chat based. So you're not disrupting a whole bunch of integrations to try something else. We've gotten some really good results from using some of the AI tools in Adobe Creative Cloud, for example. And that seems to be holding pretty steady, but still there's sometimes, in the same way you might ask 3 different people for their opinions, I might ask 3 different AIs to generate an anchor image for an upcoming
Right.
webinar, say.
Yeah, and I think I use that a lot too, where I'll run it something in Claude, and then I'll push that answers into Perplexity and validate the links, for instance, to make sure that it's not
Right.
hallucinations, right?
Yeah. So, like, in terms of, my day, I'd say my day is, uh, or my weeks rather, because no 2 days are exactly alike, but they're loosely divided between um, building business out, working on the business, our capabilities and our internal things, as well as managing direct delivery for our
Mhm.
clients. So, and having to keep all those things balanced is, um, well, AI helps, we'll say. Um, um, we have a podcast. In fact, it's in the introductions. I'm involved with 2 podcasts. There's one that I started with Microsoft when I was still there 7 or 8 years ago with my friend Mark Cashman. Still do that one. It's fantastic to have Microsoft resources behind production and marketing and all the rest.
Sure.
Internally for our Polaris podcast, I don't have the time or patience to be a full-time podcaster. It's a lot of work, and I totally respect Emanuel, what you're doing here. It's not that I don't even have an audio engineering background. If you look far enough back in my music career, you'll see that. I just don't have the time to be tweaking and tuning things, to be able to capture the right show notes, to being able to generate the right interview questions. And so for me, AI is a huge force multiplier. I can sit down in advance, pre-record the pre-interview, ask Copilot, based on what you heard, propose a structure and some questions for this, so that when it's time to record, I can be very efficient in the recording. And when we finish with it, I use a different platform that has some great AI-based tools for editing, so I can turn things around fairly quickly. Again, I don't have the luxury of spending a day to create a half-hour podcast episode, and that's just one example. I in many ways for myself, I treat AI as my fresh out of college intern.
Sure.
Whether I'm doing something like that or using GitHub Copilot to build a small application just to get things started.
Yeah, I think that is one of the amazing things is the places where we can condense and connect activities. So,
Right.
I take the Opus notes from our pre-call. It formulates, it goes in a Google Doc, along with the bios and all
Right.
that stuff. And it's all pre-populated for me for the day. And then I have another software called Influence Frame that we use for all the marketing things. And it produces these 80% complete uh, activities that then I can go in and clean up and make sure they're on brand and on target. So, it takes 10 hours and it makes it an hour instead.
Right. Right. Um, yeah, I appreciate that assistance, and it is in many ways like managing, a college intern. For instance, we have a webinar that's coming up in 2 months looking at how business strategy development. It's a workshop. It's a master class on that. I wrote the abstract, and I realized one of the places I want to pump it, I needed a 2-sentence version of it. So I asked AI, can you just give me a 2-sentence version of it? And it kept giving me back like a longer version than the original abstract, right? And we've all seen the stories where, people, you can see websites where the homepage of the website will still say something like AI generated content. Please check for accuracy before using. Like AI is really well intentioned and really done.
Yeah, it still has to be the human in the loop in order to make sure it's good quality content.
Right. There actually was a series of announcements that Microsoft made this morning. Kind of every year they do this thing called the Work Trend Index, and so the report was actually released this morning at 8 a.m. And one of the terms that Microsoft had been developing, was glad to see, I can talk about this publicly now, is the idea of an agent boss as a new job role. That you have all these agents coming in, and there's going to be a job role where it's your job to coordinate and review the work of all these agents in the same way that a traditional person is managing traditional people. This is a single person who's responsible for the output of 24 agents. Now, I will say, knowing the leadership at Microsoft personally, they're painting a picture of where things could be headed. That's not where most people are. I haven't checked yet. I don't think there are 1 million people who list agent boss as their job description on LinkedIn yet.
Well, just wait a day and it'll probably pop up since Microsoft announced it.
Yeah, I think of myself as dog boss sometime, but the dogs are actually running my house, so I shouldn't even claim
well,
that.
you bring up an interesting point in terms of leverage, right? And we're seeing this not just in digital, but also in manufacturing. Like instead of there being a manager for each lumber mill, for instance, there's a regional manager that is managing 5 lumber mills. And so
Hmm.
you have the business intelligence that's feeding these dashboards and bringing in the KPIs for each mill, and this person is managing multiples instead of traditionally it would be one manager per mill, for instance. So
I mean, there's always trade-offs with that stuff too. I saw a similar thing about how they're trying to use automation and some AI to replace bridge operators in
mhm,
parts of the country where you have lots of bridges that need elevation when a boat comes by. And the downside is that those operators do more than just hit a button to have the bridge go up. They're also there, like if someone pulls over on the side and says, I'm out of gas, or I need to get to a hospital. Like a camera and a piece of AI aren't going to be nearly as
for
much
sure.
help in those circumstances. But um, so it needs to be balanced, and that human in the loop is very much um, a phrase I wish I had copyrighted and could get a dime every time someone said
Yeah.
that. It's being used because there's a truth to it.
Yeah, I agree. I want to understand a little bit about how you construct and like these custom GPTs or data lakes or whatever you want to call this concept where we're actually starting to warehouse information so that we can continue to build on it and get better content out of our LLMs that we're interacting with.
Yeah, I'll give you an example of like one of the patterns that we've had some success with, and it relates to boards of directors. So if you think about boards of directors, they're tremendously strategic, or hopefully strategic, and they're somewhat disengaged because a board is checking in on content and information at their meetings. Maybe it's 2 or 3 times a year, maybe it's once a month, but usually not so much in between. Boards also usually have access to pools of information which need to be secure. And um, because of how most boards are governed, that information is well structured.
Mhm.
If there's a decision, it's represented in minutes. The financial statements, all the documentation, usually years and years, it's there to tap into. But I also know that on many boards, because people are disengaged, they ask a lot of questions waiting to be discovered. So something we built is an agent for boards of directors to be able to go through, you know, those years and years and years of board books, so that if someone wants to ask a question like, how come we never tried this?
Right.
You can immediately pop up the answer. This has been attempted in 2023 and 2018, and here are the results.
Nice.
Um, and beyond that, the part of it that I would like to develop, but again, we talked before, and I know you can relate to this. Like, I'm pulled in a lot of different directions, so I don't have the time to be as technical as I used
Right.
to be. So whether I finish this myself or not, or I outsource it, is an open question. I'd like to extend that agent into some of the meeting assistants, so that when there is a live meeting, to be able to listen for questions and to dynamically bring information up on the screen that's relevant, and fact check things and be able to flag if something's not correct. I'd like it to be able to do that. If I have the patience and time to finish it, it'll be cool. But that's one of the patterns that we've seen, and that's a pattern that does get extended when you think about things like across the corporate realm, to things like steering committee, or the thing you mentioned, that people are being asked to supervise 5 plants
Right.
instead of one. Well, if you're not living and breathing the everyday life of each of those facilities, how do you get up to speed on that quickly? So I do think that, I think that personally, and I'm sort of passionate about this, when people talk about agents, we have no idea what agents are actually going to be, because agents have tremendous potential to really do things that are helpful. And a lot of agents right now are kind of agents that will tell you, like, what's the weather right
Right.
now?
Yeah.
Great. I could look out the window too. It's when you start to do things that are difficult or impossible because of the scale involved, or being able to do things autonomously that feel like magic. It's sort of like the earliest days of, if you think about mobile phones, I remember, gosh, 20 years ago, in 2005, I made a comment because there were still lots of phones that were in the market before the iPhone. Um, you know, Nokia and lots of uh, companies had devices out there. There was some internet connectivity. And I was just convinced people don't have the interface right. It's, do you pop out a
Oh
keyboard?
yeah.
Remember all of the
Right.
Blackberries and all of those things. Like, eventually someone's going to get the pattern right. And it's going to skyrocket instead of being a curiosity. And lo and behold,
Sure.
we had the iPhone. I think AI revolution with the chat interface, when it comes to agents and those more focused things, we just haven't gotten it right yet. But that's okay. It'll happen in the next few years.
Yeah, and I mean, that's what we're all waiting for, right? Is this kind of transition where we're actually getting some amount of agentification instead of just basically zaps is what we have right now in
Yeah,
agent, right?
right. It's very, or if, it's very linear, this, then that.
Right.
And also agents get oversold, and it's why people get afraid of them. The idea is like, hey, you're going to turn on an agent and it's sort of going to dynamically and autonomously discover all your communication channels and ask you what it should do and say, I need help with customer onboarding, at which point it will continuously survey all of your emails, all of your chats, all of your web properties, all of your mobile apps to find customer interest. And if they submitted things and coach them through it, and then when they say yes, send the right documentation, alert the right, like, that agent that automatically can figure that out from a 10-word prompt to create it does not exist.
Right. Yeah.
Even though that's a painting that has been depicted to people who are wondering what are agents. So again, we'll get there. It's just we haven't gotten it right yet.
Yeah. Well, and it's like we said, it's very dynamic, and this Anthropic MPC that came out in November is in that direction, and a lot of people are heralding that as the precursor to true
Yep.
agentification. But there's, as we know, there's a lot of hype in this market right now.
There's a ton of hype in this market. And I don't think we're in the trough of disillusionment, yet. But it is oversold relative to where it is right now. And where it is right now is still pretty amazing. I went back to an old email of mine when we had early access before ChatGPT already existed to some of the models they were building because of the partnership with Microsoft. And the first time I saw someone do a prompt saying, we have a conference coming up in 3 months, draft a press release for what we are likely to announce, include these people as quotes, and it just came up
Yeah.
with it. And it was virtually indistinguishable from something I would have written. I thought, that's amazing.
It is. Yeah, it's
right?
amazing. Yeah.
And so, like, let's not, forget about that. Taking that core productivity, whether we're marketing about AI or using AI to market, there are things like, they're a little bit lower yield, like organic social posts, right?
Mhm.
You don't want to keep posting the same thing over and over again, nor do I want to, bespokely craft 60 separate messages that I want to post on 60 separate days. So it's much easier to have AI come up with, the right level of variations of this, that, or the other thing. And then also, please read them before you load them in. But it's much faster, especially for someone like me, because I'm a terrible typist.
Yeah. Well, and that is what's amazing right now is the proliferation of voice, and I think that's an exciting change. That's on the very near term where we will have a voice of activated assistant.
That's just, by the way, it's a sidebar. There's a meta trend going on there that I'm really fascinated by, which is, as we've seen a proliferation of AI systems coming together with a chat interface, and the rising prevalence of being able to work with them using not just typed natural language, but spoken natural language. That's happening around the same time that there's workforce pressures on RTO, on return to office, and returning to offices, which in modern design are usually open plan. So it's like one of the, it's like that old movie from the 80s, Wall Street, where you see Charlie Sheen's character, meeting room, and everyone's on the phone and everyone's yelling and it's super loud. Like, I wonder,
Right.
like, are we, what does the literal future of work look like with return to office and verbally based systems? I can't quite predict,
Yeah.
but I know that that's something we're going to need to sort out.
Well, I hope we don't have to all get Neuralinks and that we can still use our voices. That's my hope.
Right. Or we'll just use the old, what was that show? Get Smart,
Yeah.
Cone of Silence, pull down over your head to talk to it. But it is one of the tips. A good friend of mine is one of the engineering leaders at Microsoft on Copilot. And that's one of his tips, which is always to use on Microsoft Windows H, if you're on a Windows computer, which opens up the dictate interface. He's like, just
nice.
talk to your AI. And that, by the way, that works equally well if you're inside of an email or a Word document or something else, but just use your voice to talk to AI instead of typing.
I love that. I'm gonna make a note of that. That's going in all my presentations now.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. Speaking of presentations, you've got some things coming up. Tell us about that.
Yeah, we got a couple things coming up. I'll be speaking in Las Vegas the start of May as part of the M365 conference at the MGM Grand. Also, later on in June, doing a number of presentations in Seattle as part of TechCon 365. All of those details are available through our website at Synozur.com. That's SYNOZUR. It is a name which has the SEO advantage of never having been used before, and also the disadvantage of no one knows how to spell it or pronounce it.
Well, at least it was creative, though. That's what we got to say.
The name actually, and we've, I think, really leaned into this in our branding. So the name is derived from the ancient Greek term for the North Star, Polaris. And so the idea of having that central navigation point and things are spinning and we can help guide that, that's something that we use in our go-to-market and all of our messaging. It's almost like going to the planet, launching soon. We already have some celestial imagery, but now it's sort of like going to a planetarium. But it's pretty. It's nice. It works.
That's amazing. Well, Chris, I appreciate your time and your insight. You and I could probably spend the next 4 hours talking about this, but
sure, it's an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, well, I'm grateful for your time, and we'll make sure all those links are in the show notes, and people will be able to get a hold of you there or on LinkedIn, where I know you spend some time.
I'm always there. So,
as are you. Thanks for your time.
Anyway, by the way, let me just, before we wrap up, I just want to congratulate you. You crossed the century mark. A lot of podcasters don't make it there. So I just wanted to share that appreciation for you and for the rest of the audience.
I appreciate that. That was a big deal for me to have that many conversations, and it's really been to my benefit to be able to talk to people like you and learn so much over the last 15 months. So thanks. Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Talk to you soon. So there you have it. Let's stay focused on having outcomes, some KPIs for your AI projects, not just bringing in the next new shiny thing. And reach out to Chris if you have some projects that are a little more complicated than off-the-shelf AI.
Thanks for listening to Marketing in the Age of AI. Be sure to subscribe wherever you heard this podcast so you never miss a future episode. Your copy of Authentic Marketing in the Age of AI is available at Amazon.com or EmanuelRose.com. You can also connect with Emanuel on LinkedIn. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time.